He was listed in the top 50 social media power influencer on Forbes.com at number 14, and winner in the 2012 top 10 social media blogs on Social Media Examiner. It's my great pleasure to welcome and invite Mr. Jeff Bullas to speak now. Jeff?
I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to actually travel from a country far away, Sydney, Australia, to speak at this conference. It's an honour and a privilege. And we actually maybe have almost more Lebanese in Australia than you actually have in Lebanon itself. The other thing that amazed me as I got off the plane in Lebanon and travelled to the hotel was that the incredible bravery of the Lebanese. The Lebanese seem to have the courage that surpasses what we have in Australia, because they seem to be able to drive at high speed on a scooter with a family attached, not wearing a helmet, going up a one-way street, breaking every law in Lebanon. I was just amazed. So I really love the Lebanese spirit. And I congratulate you. We live in a marvellous time that we sometimes take for granted. And I would call myself, I suppose, a product of the digital age. I originally trained as a teacher. I found the children weren't well behaved, so I decided to leave teaching. And I got in the technology industry and in the personal computer industry. And it was amazing to see the growth of personal computers. The next part of the journey I had was getting involved with the internet. In 1995, I turned on the internet for the first time and used a browser called Alta Vista and discovered information from the other side of the world. It was like magic. And I remember talking to my grandfather on my mobile phone before mobile phones became smartphones. And I was talking to him as I was driving along. I can remember the time, I can remember the place. Now, my grandfather was brought up in a time where he delivered milk by horse and cart. And as I spoke to him, he said, "Grandson, this is amazing. You're talking to me while driving along in a car with no wires attached. It's like magic." And it reminds me of a quote by Arthur C. Clarke. And Arthur C. Clarke said that there is no distinguishable difference between a sufficiently advanced technology and magic. So today, the reason I'm speaking here today is because of technology that is transforming the world as we speak. And it still continues to amaze me. I was having a conversation earlier about the rise of social media and how should we use it. And the thing is, we are all still experimenting with social media. It is so new. So I encourage all of you to actually take the challenge and continue to experiment and have some fun with it, because that's been my experience. We have a challenge now. We used to have one brand. It was your personal brand or business brand, and it was offline. With your personal brand, you're able to get up in the morning and you would actually present your personal brand, your offline brand to the world. You would actually have a shower, get shaved, put your makeup on. Sometimes men do that as well. And put on your best clothes and go forth into the world and network, do business. That was your brand. It's become much more complicated than that. We now have another brand to look after at the same time. It's your online brand. Now, what's really interesting is that when you go onto your mobile now, when you get up in the morning, in fact, even before you get up, they found that research has shown that people are checking their Facebook page before they even get out of bed and go to the toilet. They check their emails before they even have a shower. So what we have is the challenge of actually maintaining a brand online as well as an offline brand. And that is the real challenge for us today. And it's not just one channel, it's not just Facebook, it's your Twitter feed, it's your blog posts, it's your comments, it's your SlideShare, it's your LinkedIn profile. These are all different channels that we now have to manage with your online brand. So, my online brand started about 4 years ago, and before that, yes, I had email, I used a computer, but everything was quite offline. No one could see my emails. And I actually got onto Facebook. And I joined Facebook, and as I joined, I click a button, said, where I'd gone to university, and colleagues I hadn't seen in 20 to 25 years started appearing on my screen. Some looking a bit older, some looking a lot older, some looking a little balder, some looking fatter, some looking thinner. We'd all grown a little older. And it was really amazing. Then I noticed as I started to use Facebook was that there was this real obsession that I noticed about people's use of Facebook. And as a marketer, I said, this obsession that drives this connectivity, this want to actually communicate and publish online is very, very powerful. And where that obsession is, and you only have to observe it on other channels such as Twitter, is to realise that as a business you can take opportunity of this obsession, people's willingness to connect online globally and connect with their tribes and followers, is to use that in a very constructive way to help your business grow, especially as marketers. And most of you here are marketers that you are starting to use the opportunity of social media to connect and digital channels. So I used Facebook for about 6 months, and then I joined Twitter, and that was in end of 2008. So I've nearly been on Twitter for 4 years, and Twitter only had about 5 million users back then. Today, some of the numbers on Twitter, and they vary depending on research, is that there are over 500 million registered users. So I got into Twitter, and like a lot of people that I've spoken to, is Twitter is a very strange social networking channel. In fact, Twitter was never meant to be a social network. It was actually meant to be an internal messaging service at a podcasting company called Omeo. So Twitter actually was a social network by accident. And at Southwest by Southwest, about a year later, it actually started to gain traction. And when I first joined Twitter, I really didn't know what to do with it. 140 characters? What can you do with 140 characters? So what happened was I just sort of tweeted a bit. A friend of mine, John Oxley, invited me onto it, and I really didn't do much with it. Then I decided to start blogging a few months later, and the reason I started blogging was because of 3 inspirations. I don't know if you heard of a book by David Meerman Scott called The New Rules of Marketing and PR. Also a very interesting book by Tim Ferriss called The 4-Hour Work Week. Now that sounds appealing, doesn't it? Who wants to work 4 hours and get paid well? Then there was also a blog which some of you might have heard of, which is a B2B a business called HubSpot. And I was just amazed by the content that HubSpot actually published online. Those 3 motivations were encouragement enough for me to actually start blogging. So I started blogging, and the big fear with publishing online, especially when you start blogging, is that when you hit publish, you are visible to actually over 2 billion people now. But the reality is, when you start blogging, is that no one notices, because you get lost in a universe of 550 million websites. So what I learned along the way was, when you start publishing, no one actually starts to notice. Then I started to use Twitter after I published the blog. I started writing, and then what happened was I started using Twitter much better. And what happened was I started to actually use Twitter to create some followers globally that were interested in social media, because the blog I started was on how to use social media marketing for business. And when I used Twitter initially, I really didn't know what to do with it. So I made a lot of mistakes. And I think that's the reality with all of you, is that as you start to use social media, you're going to make some mistakes. And don't be afraid to make some. Sometimes there's a phrase called is fail fast, often, and keep doing it. So that's what I did. I actually started using Twitter well. So then I started publishing more often, and what I discovered was that what really drives interaction online is content. Because a lot of people think social media is just about tweeting what you had for breakfast, is posting up images from the weekend, what you did at a party. And I think the challenges for CEOs and senior managers is Facebook is seen as being something that teenagers and young people use, and it's not seen as a serious business tool. So these are some of the challenges that we start to face as you start to publish online. So I started very innocently, I got better at it, I made some mistakes, as we all do, and I still continue to do that. And for me, my blog, my channels are still an experiment. So don't be afraid to experiment. So what are some of the challenges for you in a digital world where you're trying to create a brand life for yourself or for your business? The challenge actually is that quite often senior management who run the businesses are brought up in a different age. People change slowly, but we have a technology that's changing rapidly. So that is one big challenge we all have. Just to give you some ideas in terms of how quickly we actually are changing, it took radio 38 years to reach 50 million users. Facebook in 12 months added 200 million. So we have social media changing the whole landscape rapidly, and we as humans, as business managers, as marketeers, are still challenged by the pace of the change. All of us are challenged by the pace of the change, whether you're in this industry or you are not. The other challenge is that we still think local rather than global, because as human beings we are still very connected to the physical world. It's wired into our DNA. And I remember I was in the office one morning, and one of my colleagues, Patrick, there was a package for him, and it weighed about 25 kilograms. And I put it on his desk, and I said to Patrick, I said, "What's this?" And he said, "Oh, it's a car suspension part for my car, and it's been delivered from the other side of the world." I said, "You got a 25 kilogram car part, suspension for your Mazda. Why did you get it shipped from the other side of the world?" He said, "Well, it was 40% cheaper. It was 25 kilograms. So, as a business, you've got to start thinking that you are not just competing with a shop round the corner or in the same city or country. You are now competing with businesses around the world. So you really have to start thinking about global competitiveness. That is really where you've got to start thinking. You are now a global business, not just a local business. And especially in a knowledge economy where you can sell your expertise in consulting around the world, there's a lot of people, even consultants, do Skype calls. You've got to start thinking local, global, not local. The other challenge is actually managing disruption, and I think in Lebanon you have a lot of challenges, and I admire your spirit in terms of managing what is constant disruption to your business. But if you have a look at some industries that we thought were going to last forever, we have a look at the likes of Kodak, which is now in bankruptcy. We look at stores like Borders selling books. We're having industries being totally turned on their head and disappearing almost overnight. I just published a book. I self-published it on Amazon myself. I didn't need to ask permission from an author. I published it on Amazon. And that is the opportunity and the challenge for us, is actually to adapt to this disruption. We only have to look at the likes of Apple and how they've actually disrupted not one industry, not two, but several. The other challenge is, and it's also an opportunity, is there's over 550 million websites. Now, how do you get found in an ocean and universe of 550 million websites? It is an amazing challenge for us all. Just to give you some idea of the actual volume of, is created each day, is each day 1.5 billion new pieces of content are created every 24 hours. There are 200 million tweets every day. And there are 2 million new videos published online every 24 hours. That is an avalanche of information. Eric Schmidt in 2003 said this: every 2 days we create as much information as we did from the dawn of civilization up until 2003. So we have this avalanche of information. And the challenge for us is quite often not what to read, but what not to read. In other words, sometimes you've just got to say, I'm not going to read that, because sometimes we go down so many rabbit holes that we actually get lost in the information. And for me, that I love reading, I love information, I love research, I have to actually determine what I'm not going to read, not what I'm going to read. So it's actually like drinking from this fire hydrant. It actually becomes very difficult. So how do we create a brand's digital life? I want to put some perspective on this because there's another hat I wear, and I'm an account director for a digital agency in Sydney, and we create e-commerce sites for big brands, content sites for companies. And what I quite often find is when we ask for budget to actually build a website, quite often they say, I only want to spend a little bit of money. And yet they're willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a bricks and mortar store. But you think about it. If you have a bricks and mortar store, you might only have 100 people turn up each day, maybe 200. If you're lucky, a big store, maybe 500 or 1,000. A website, and to give you an idea, my blog gets 300,000 visitors a month. So the reality is, building an online store should be treated as a valuable digital asset. It actually should be treated even more importantly than your online bricks and mortar store. But the problem is that the paradigm is that because we can touch and feel a bricks and mortar store, your offline reality gets the money. You really need to start thinking how important it is in a global economy, in a digital world, to actually build a digital asset. But what are digital assets? Okay, I want to propose 5 different types of digital assets that we should be building on. The website is your home and hub, and I think the other thing too, especially in the social media space, and I find because Facebook is the shiny new toy, is that people think that you should be spending all your time just using Facebook. The challenge with Facebook is that Facebook, if you don't for some reason break their rules or their terms and conditions, Facebook can just shut you down. Okay, if they shut you down, and I've heard of companies turning over $1 billion have had their Facebook page just shut down, try and call them. The lights are on, but no one's at home. The reality is your website, which has your domain name, you own. So you've really got to treat your website, your blog, your e-commerce site as the most important hub and home for you to build what I call your digital online brand. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be building your Facebook likes, doesn't mean you should be building up your Twitter followers or your YouTube views or your YouTube channel. But I think you've got to keep in perspective is where the ownership is and where the control is. And the reality is that Google and all the other search engines, Bing, Yahoo, actually index and keep you on file basically forever. So, digital website. The challenge for most of us is that when we did websites in the past, it was just set and forget. Put a website up, come back 2 years later, it still looks the same. The reality is the modern website's got to be much more interesting. It's got to be constantly changing. It's got to be dynamic. It's got to go from being text-based to being much more visual. It's got to go to two-way communication, not one way. And a website, as was mentioned at the beginning, is not an option anymore. If you are not online, you quite often are not seen as existing. We're going to touch more on visual design, Tarek, when we talk on the panel soon, but I'm just going to touch on intuitive visual design is actually very, very important. And there's an interview that was done by Steve Jobs in 1997 by Wired magazine. And when I heard this for the first time, I realised the importance of great intuitive design. And Steve Jobs was asked, he said, people think that design is how it looks. He said, design goes much deeper than that. It's actually how it works. And you only have to pick up an iPhone or an iPad and realise that Steve Jobs got it. The great intuitive design now that's emerging, both on Apple's technology and other technologies, shows that you've really got to make sure that the website works intuitively. Don't make people ask questions. And Steve Jobs said also that you really need to grok it. And grok it is actually a real word, G-R-O-K. It was actually created by a science fiction writer in the 1960s. And to grok something means to intuitively understand and empathise. So what you've got to do with design is make sure that you really understand the people that are visiting your site are wanting to do. So what else is essential? The other thing that's very important with a website actually is to actually build it so it is easy to change. Content can be changed quickly, and there are great content management systems using with the acronym CMS, like WordPress, especially for blogs and websites. For e-commerce, there are CMS platforms called Magento. There are other ones like Drupal and Joomla. These are platforms that allow you to actually change websites quickly without having to have a programmer involved. The other thing that's happening on your website is you really need to have great content, and I can't stress how important content is, because what I've discovered being a blogger is that content is what makes people turn up. It's not just a little tweet, it's not just doing something onto Facebook. You've got to be able to write a great headline that brings people to your website or your blog or your e-commerce site and actually want to share it. To give you an idea of how important this is becoming, is only 12 months ago, Coca-Cola changed their whole marketing strategy. They changed it from, and this is the biggest brand in the world, you've got to keep in mind, and when the biggest brand in the world changes its marketing strategy, it's time to take notice. Coca-Cola changed its strategy in marketing from creative excellence to content excellence. And they called this strategy liquid and linked. The whole strategy, one of the major keys behind the strategy was actually create what they call liquid content. Now, what we mean by liquid content is content that moves easily and flows around the web. I call it also contagious content. It's creating content that people want to share, that begs to be shared. Linked content, and this is what we're going to touch on too on the panel, is linked content is content that is congruent with your brand message. Whether it's visual, whether it's text, whether it's a video. You need to make sure that the content that you are creating is giving the right message out about your brand. What do you stand for? So when Coca-Cola changes its strategy from creative excellence to content excellence, it's time to take notice. The other thing you need to do, and this is what I learned from some of the best people in the industry and in the business globally, such as HubSpot and B2B businesses, is to create content that's in a variety of different multimedia. So whether it's a visual image, whether it's a video, whether it's a podcast, whether it's an ebook, whether it's a white paper, you need to be creating a whole range of content that touches people in different ways, because we all have preferences on how we actually want to view information. Teenagers or younger people would much prefer to watch a 2-minute YouTube video than read a block of text. So you need to put content onto a YouTube video for people to read or me to view. The older generation would prefer to read an article, a white paper. Some people love just seeing an image, and you have to go to fashion blogging sites or fashion websites or e-commerce stores. You actually find that the content is much more visual. So to touch people in different ways, there are many touch points is actually to build content in a variety of multimedia. And this touches on what has really rapidly emerged in the last 12 months, which is almost astounded the world. Instagram, which is just a photo site that people can actually just upload with a couple of clicks from their smartphones, which now has approaching 100 million users, and was bought by Facebook for $1 billion and hadn't made a cent of profit. But you only have to look at the growth of it and its popularity to realise that maybe Facebook hasn't paid too much, but the jury's still out on that. The other popular platform that has really emerged is actually Pinterest. Who's heard of Pinterest in the room here? Okay, if I asked you that question 12 months ago, how many people would have put up their hand? Almost. Okay, we've got one at the back. But that's, to give you an idea, we have a platform that's gone from zero to almost global brand awareness in 12 months. So what you need to do is need to be building your websites, your online platforms, using and sharing them on these channels. The other thing too, I quite often go to even well-known bloggers outside the technology industry, and they're not built for sharing. You've got to build your website for sharing. That is really, really important, because we live in an age where people are going to retweet and Facebook share. They're all going to put you onto LinkedIn. You've got to make it easy. Don't ask people to cut and paste. Other type of website is an e-commerce website, and this is really rapidly happening around the world. Online e-commerce in the US is actually about 11% of total retail sales. In Australia, it's about 5%. And I wouldn't mind betting that in Lebanon, it's even lower than that. But the rise of e-commerce, where you can sell to a global audience, is a real opportunity. And I think the opportunity really exists for you in Lebanon here is because you can sell not just to a local audience or just to the Middle East, you can now sell to a global audience, a global target market. So you have an enormous opportunity to actually take your business globally, as we mentioned before, as one of the challenges. But what's happening with e-commerce is that in the last 12 months, a new phrase has emerged which is called omni-channel retailing, which is actually making it easy for people to buy no matter where they are, whether they're on your iPad, an iPhone, or whether on a website, or in the bricks and mortar store. It really doesn't matter. You've got to make it easy for people to buy. And I was driving to an appointment a few months ago, and one of my colleagues had his iPad out, and as we're driving there, he bought a t-shirt off eBay. So the reason he was able to buy it from eBay is because he made it easy to actually buy from a mobile device. So this is really important. So what you've got to do is make sure that you decentralise the shopping experience. So if the customer walks into your store, decides not to buy it then, they can go home and buy it from their iPad or from their web or from their laptop or for their desktop. What's also happening is that Amazon put out an application recently which allows people to showroom. So actually you can go into, scan a product, and it'll tell you what it is on Amazon, and you can buy it from Amazon rather than the store you went into. And this is turning retail on its head as well. And what you're finding is especially the younger generation are going with mobile phones, scanning products, finding which is the cheapest and buying the cheapest product. So this is a challenge for you as a business, is competing with some of these big global players as well. With the rise of Facebook and others, it was actually considered that it would lead to the demise of blogging because Facebook was so easy to create an online presence and brand. But in fact, what has happened is that blogging has actually become more popular. In fact, social media channels enable blogging to actually spread faster and further than ever before through social media networks. Huffington Post was sold recently for over $300 million. Some of the bigger blogs in the world actually have more reach and more viewers than some of the big brand newspapers that are valued sometimes in the billions of dollars. So blogging actually is a new media publishing that is transforming publishing. Mobile, how important is that? Well, mobile is still a challenge. It's actually growing very rapidly. Last year, nearly 500 million smartphones were actually bought. But to put into perspective the importance of mobile actually passed a tipping point about 18 months ago when the number of sales of smartphones exceeded the sale of computers. So that just puts some perspective on the importance of mobile. And with the announcement of the iPad app for the magazine, that is a really great move because people are more and more consuming from their iPads rather than buying a magazine. So you've really got to be joining the game, otherwise you could become irrelevant in time. The other very interesting, quirky fact about the importance of mobiles, not just smartphones, is actually more mobiles in the world than there are toothbrushes. $600 million more people have a digital phone, than actually have a toothbrush. So what does that say? There's a lot of people with mobile phones with dirty teeth. So there's some of the numbers. 300,000 apps downloaded. I think maybe some of these numbers, these change rapidly so they can quickly go out of date. The Apple iPad has changed the way we view and read information. And in 2012, they're forecasting over 106 million tablets to actually be sold. So we've reached this mobile tipping point. So how do we use mobiles? We actually use it for browsing, we use it for searching, we use it for email. In fact, in Australia, as I walk down the street, I quite often bump into people because they're on the smartphone. In fact, I do a bit of road cycling in Australia, and actually the most dangerous person for me is someone with a smartphone on with earpiece in their ear because they can't hear you. So we are actually consumed. And I think there's really two important, really what I call almost obsessive trends which have emerged over the last few years, and that is mobile phone and social media. And they're both creating an addiction to technology. But it provides an opportunity for you as marketers and businesses to actually use that to sell more products and services and create awareness. So, with a mobile, what are two tips? One, you need to start looking or considering building what we call a mobile, quite often this term that's being used now is a responsive site, that basically no matter what type of device that your mobile are using, your actual website will display in the correct manner. The other one is to build apps, such as apps for a mobile or apps for an iPad or a tablet. Okay, social networks. One of the biggest challenges, and we were talking amongst the panel last night, and I come across it all the time, is that people think that social networks are Facebook. That's social, that's it, Facebook, done and dusted. I'd just like to let you know that social networks are much more than just Facebook. In fact, some of the big aims of even organisations that I've come across is all they want to do is increase their Facebook likes. The reality is that Facebook actually limits your updates as a brand on your Facebook page into people's personal profiles. In fact, it can be as low as only 2 or 3% of people that like your page will actually receive your updates in their actual stream. Now that's a very, very low number because Facebook doesn't want to actually spam people with updates from all the brands that people like. So social networks are much more than Facebook. There are other very important channels, LinkedIn, Twitter. Twitter is growing rapidly. It's something that I've found to be very, very powerful in terms of driving traffic and awareness. And Twitter actually, you can create very, very focused targeting globally by building up your followers in that stream. So social networks is much more than Facebook. Yes, get involved with Facebook and use it well. Learn to use it for your business, but don't think that is where you stop. Digital asset that's very, very important is content. And I think the challenge for us as organisations, I've heard it especially in the Arabic world, is that there's not a lot of good content that is in Arabic. And that's a challenge for you, is actually to create great content. I've heard of bloggers being hired to create content. Because content is one of the core foundations you should be building, because that's the reason people turn up to read a newspaper. It's the content. That's why people watch a YouTube video. It's the content. That's the people go and click on a link in Twitter. It's because they want to go and read information. They want to be informed. They want to be educated. They want to be entertained. And beyond that, I think there's a burning desire within all of us to actually achieve and make a difference in the world, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for your business or for your family. So content that educates, informs, inspires and entertains is very, very important. And you should always be keeping in mind, what is my content going to do? Is it going to help someone today? Is it going to add value? And what I've certainly discovered as a blogger is that I'm always asking the question, is what do people want to get from what I'm writing today? Will it teach them something? Will it add value to their lives? In fact, everyone has problems. So quite often I find one of the best ways to actually get what I call liquid content or contagious content is to actually write articles or create videos that actually solve problems. Because every business has problems. If you're willing to help them solve their problems, they're going to keep coming back. This is one I had a discussion with the panel yesterday, and email is maybe old school. But I'll tell you what I do like about email is that when you build up a database of email of people that opt in, that agree to receive your content from you, is that they're asking permission. They're actually saying, I want your content. And I find that I can actually send an email out every day as I post and publish and to people, and you can have very, very high open rates for people to actually want to receive your content. The other thing too is in Australia, accountants actually put a value on your email database. So the other thing too is, it is very different to Facebook in the sense that when you have an email, you can send out an email whenever you like. You've got to use it responsibly, of course. You just don't want to be a spam, but you actually own it. And as you build your email database, you can segment it, you can target it. It's under your control. I think it's important that we build assets that you control, as well as participating on social networks such as Facebook and Twitter. So, I come across a lot of businesses that say, okay, I've invested a lot of money in my website, I've got a blog, I've got an e-commerce store, the world's just going to show up. Okay? The reality is far different from that. Your work has only just begun. And I would recommend to all of you that you need to consider building up your marketing for your website. You need to invest in being found online. It is no different to offline world. You need to invest in having your website discovered. So, what's the first step? A lot of people just say, well, I'm going to market and I'm just going to set up a Facebook page because I want to do that, and everyone else is doing it, so I've got a Facebook page, I've got a Twitter account. You actually need to sit back, take a deep breath, and actually look at creating a strategy. The strategy starts with a vision of where you want to be as a company. What's your message? What's your brand message? The two other things that are important, as well as some others, is you've got to know who your audience is. What information do they want to receive? And the next one that's really important is, what goals are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to create a brand awareness? Are you trying to drive people to a landing page? Are you trying to build Facebook likes? Are you trying to grow your Twitter following? So the strategy has got to come before the tactics. Once you've got your strategy clearer, then you need to actually implement the tactics. And finally, and this is one we're going to touch on in the panel as well, is that what is fantastic about digital is you can measure almost anything. You can find out what works, what doesn't work. And quite often in the offline world, whether it's a pamphlet delivered to a letterbox or whether it's a print ad, you cannot measure how many people have actually read it. You know how many you've sold, but it gets really hard to measure. And that's a challenge for moving from the offline to online, and integrating those is actually being aware of the importance of measurement. So marketing digital brand, I'm going to touch on a few here. Facebook and social is very important, but don't be blinded by the shiny new toy. One of the most important things you should be working on, and it does take time, this is organic, is actually building your website so it starts to appear in search engines. I went to a recent conference, and there's a big US e-commerce site. They turn over $500 million, pardon me. And what they highlighted was that organic search, in other words, appearing in Google search results or Bing or Yahoo or search engines, is free traffic. So how important is it? Up to 90% in some instances, in some industry, of decisions, buying decisions, actually start with an online search. So if you're not found in online search, then you're actually making it really difficult for business to succeed. Now, some of you have seen on one side of your search results almost lightly coloured results, and then in the middle is what we call organic. So you have paid and you have organic results. Now, the paid ones are only 25% of click-throughs. The organic in the middle, which you can earn for free over time, is 75% of all clicks. So how important is it to actually appear on the first page of Google? Number one receives 40% of all clicks, according to some research. 40% just being in the first position. In fact, over 90% of all clicks to websites from search engines happens on the first page. So if you're not working at your SEO, your search engine optimization, so you appear high in search results, you're only 10% of the action. So investing and building up your search engine results is very, very important. The other thing that's very, very important is that quite often, because organic SEO takes so much time, is actually you need to get moving. And paid, like banner ads and that sort of thing, acts as a catalyst to actually be found online, because they're your, what turn up are banners on websites like Yahoo and others, and all websites around the world, is that we have the ability to actually pay for appearing online. So if you've got a new startup, you've got a new e-commerce store or a new business, sometimes you need to get some traction fast rather than wait for your search engine optimization to increase. How important is paid online advertising? Here are some numbers. Maybe a bit hard to read here, but I'll tell you what they are. The green is the decline of print advertising. The blue is the increase in internet advertising. And what is really, really apparent is that how we consume media is very different to what companies are spending on. If your customers are hanging out online, that's where you need to be considering spending. But we're trapped in some of the old ways. So paid online marketing can be done on social media channels, it can be done on different big media sites. You can advertise on Facebook, you can advertise on LinkedIn. Twitter's still working out its advertising model, but it is slowly evolving. So you can accelerate your brand's discovery online by actually paying for it. The other one is email marketing, as we've mentioned, is that it's very important because you have control of it. With email marketing, you actually own your database, and that's really, really important. And this is some interesting numbers, especially for Lebanon, is that with the financial industry, 52% of people prefer to actually receive information as alerts, and in travel, 43%, whether it's travelling by airline. In fact, even teens prefer it. And in fact, some of the numbers I saw recently was that 75% of people actually check email before they have breakfast. So don't discount email as an important tool. And you can grow your email database using some clever techniques. One is actually, if you're asking people to give you their email address to actually receive your information and content from you, is to give them something in return, such as an ebook or some exclusive information. Social media marketing. It's what we're all still trying to work out. It's still brand new, but it offers a world of opportunity that we're still trying to grasp. It gives us access to global tribes. It gives us access to global audiences and customers and prospects that you weren't able to do 5 years ago. I did a little bit of research on the Lebanese market in terms of social media, and I discussed it when I arrived yesterday when I had lunch. And I think these numbers are fairly accurate from what I can work out. Facebook is your big player in the Lebanese market in terms of social networks at over 30%. There's only 4% on LinkedIn, and there's actually only 2% on Twitter. But Twitter is rapidly rising. One of the reasons Twitter is rapidly rising is because it's now embedded actually in Apple's operating system on their mobile phones. But there's a whole range of other social media platforms that are very, very important as well. Now, I just want to touch on this before we have a quick look at social media, in that social media is not just for business to consumer or B2C. In B2B, if you have a look at some of the best players globally, they're actually creating content that actually educates. They engage on social networks that work best for B2B, such as LinkedIn. What I found a very, very important thing here is SlideShare. Who has heard of SlideShare here in the room? Okay, a few of you. It's basically the YouTube for PowerPoint presentations. So actually what I'll do after this in 24 hours, I'll actually upload this presentation for you to view online, plus it'll be available on the event site. And multimedia is not just for business brands or consumer brands. Just some top tips in B2C. In B2C, quite often we need to entertain more than we need to educate. I'm not saying these are mutually exclusive, but these are maybe some of the angles you can take. You need to look at the actual networks where your customers are hanging out. That's where you need to do, that's part of your strategy and your planning. Facebook is vital for B2C, but don't ignore Twitter. And also multimedia is huge, especially YouTube. Some of the questions I have from people as I come across is actually, when I publish, which channels should I just use Facebook? Well, the reality is you should actually be using as many channels as you possibly can. It should be a hub and spoke publishing model. Publish to as many different social networks where your customers are hanging out as you possibly can, as time, resources and money allow. It's vital. So why should I use social media? It actually amplifies your content. It takes it from one to many, which is actually exponential. And this is where the real power of social media comes into its own, as we know. The other thing too is because you can actually tweet, retweet instantly, it happens in real time. We have real time spreading of your brand. Make it easy. The other thing I've certainly found is that it provides what we call global networking on steroids. Right? It allows you to network globally in real time. In fact, doing offline networking is great, but doing online is actually very, very powerful. I remember this comment by Stephen Fry, the English comedian and author, and he said, we have now a publishing machine in our pocket, and it's your smartphone. You can upload an image to Facebook page, you can tweet, you can even change your blog. You actually have a publishing machine in your pocket. It's the biggest change to publishing since the Gutenberg press was invented over 550 years ago. Take advantage of it. Think like a publisher. The other one is actually we now have global word of mouth. We just don't have word of mouth as we meet face-to-face in meetings. We actually can get people to share and crowdsource our marketing for us. The other thing I've discovered too is that it facilitates trust. I remember I was in Italy speaking and I said, why did you actually ask me to speak? They said, well, we saw you online and we saw you everywhere. Because the Edelman Trust Barometer actually shows that if someone sees you online once, they trust you 4%. There's only a 4% trust factor. If they see you online, 3 to 5 times the trust factor goes to 59%. So the challenge for you as a brand to actually grow your digital brand online is to actually be in as many places as possible. So 6 keys to being successful with social media. Treat your social networks as your outposts. They're your brand ambassadors. Get them to speak about you, share you, talk about you. Your website and your blog and your e-commerce site is your hub and home. You own it. Build your tribes. You need to build fanatical tribes that love what you do, love your content, and want to share it. Listen to your audience, engage with them. Okay, let them know you're listening. And there's a lot of companies actually doing online research without having to spend a cent by using Facebook. Do you like this product or that product? The one that gets the most likes gets manufactured. Publish multimedia regularly. Put sharing buttons everywhere on websites. Drive traffic to your website and call to action landing pages. So managing. I'm going to touch on this, we're going to talk more about in the panel, but you need to be monitoring what's being said about your brand online and quickly respond and use tools. And there's some there's some tools that are emerging now that are actually allowing you to do that at scale. The challenge is a lot of the time we're using little tools like Hootsuite and others which actually allow us to measure people. We actually monitor what's being said about you via hashtags and searches, but you need to start looking at some of the tools that allow you to monitor and measure. So, what are the takeaways from creating, marketing and managing your brand's digital life? Build your online assets relentlessly. Don't forget mobile, it's growing rapidly. You need to be building for the mobile environment. Don't forget search engines. Email is still important even though it's a bit old school and it's not sexy and funky at the moment. Create great liquid content. Market your assets on as many networks as you possibly can in a variety of multimedia, and continue to monitor, engage and measure so that you can see what works and what doesn't work. Do you have to be really clever, really intelligent? I think what I've discovered over the last few years is that you need to be persistent. You need to be relentless. I love this quote by Calvin Coolidge. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not, genius won't, education won't. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are important. Thank you very much. I think you've got a great opportunity to take your business to a new level if you use the tools correctly. Thank you.